really exciting chapter of One Piece, Pedro brings the Mink Tribe pain to Big Mom's army, and Brook proves once again why he's the King of Soul, as he takes on Big Mom's strongest warriors with the power of rock and roll. Big Mom can infuse things with the power of her soul. Brook can remove his soul from his body and actually rock the very core of anyone's soul. I never thought about this before, but Brook might be incredibly instrumental in bringing down Big Mom, as well as all of her homies. This week's chapter of One Piece was downright awesome, and dare I say, one of the most badass moments from Brook. What I really love about this is that we're finally getting to see some new techniques from that character. He's a really goofy character. I mean, he's a giant gangly skeleton with a frigging afro who constantly goes, yoo! But finally, he is bringing his rock and roll skills to the battlefield. And this week's chapter was incredibly exciting. Very simple, but very awesome. What I think I loved most about it is that Pedro just kicked all sorts of ass in this chapter. Essentially, Pedro is acting as a decoy. He's the ultimate distraction. He's just going in and causing all of this massive destruction with his fighting skills, his swordsmanship, and the power of Electro. While this is all going on, this gives Brook the perfect opportunity to sneak into the treasure room, and thanks to his soul abilities, he's able to take down all of these soldiers which have been infused with Big Mom's soul. They all happen to be modeled after chess pieces, and he brings out his guitar, he starts to tune it, and finally starts to blind them with the power of rock! Without a doubt, my favorite panel from this chapter was when you get to see Brook's soul just rising up over this massive army, and it looks so ominous, and it's not too often you can say that about a skeleton with an afro. Brook himself is incredibly fascinating to the residents of Big Mom's island, and it makes sense that she's trying to create an incredibly diverse island with different races of every single kind, and to have an afro skeleton as a part of her crew or a part of her family would probably make her very happy, but Brook is not going to have any of that, and he needs to work fast, because Smoothie is just right outside the door, and she looks like she is ready to kick some ass, and man, I know she was big in the last chapter, but damn, she is tall as shit in this one, and she has got some thunder thighs that would crush your damn throat. The rest of the chapter is fairly simple. It basically just opens up with Big Mom, who's incredibly happy over the prospect of this brand new marriage that's getting ready to happen, the cake that she's going to devour, and the fact that she has the Tamate Bako, which is that very rare box that she got from the fishmen. But as soon as she starts to feel comfortable, that's when she learns that there's this big attack going down, which could actually spell disaster for Luffy and his friends. I'm interested to see how she's going to take all of this. And then you have the character of Sanji, who is honestly, I think, making the best of a bad situation. Yes, he is going to have to say goodbye to his friends, but he knows that they're going to be safe, and he's going to be spending a lot of time with a very pretty lady. He basically goes back to the old school way of Sanji, where he basically is just constantly pining over women, and you get to see he's even hanging out in the garden picking some flowers. This could all be a facade on the outside, but honestly, he really does look like he's enjoying himself. The end of the chapter is when things really start to get interesting, as Pudding decides that she's going to confront Luffy and Nami, and she goes up to Luffy saying that she's not going to marry Sanji. She whispers something into his ear, and we don't hear it, but she seems very sad over this prospect. Now, a couple of different things could be happening here. One, here's what I think is going down. I don't think she's actually going to go through the marriage because she's actually going to leave the island entirely. She might actually be taking a little bit of inspiration from her big sister Lola. She might try to leave and get away from this marriage just like her sister. Or there could be another darker option. Christian is not here with me today for the review, but he gave me his input, and he suggested that Pudding might actually try to commit suicide. I think that's a little dark for the series, but I wanted to give his take on what she's planning to do. But I'm really interested what her overall plan is going to be. It's something that makes her very sad, though. Pudding's actions could spell disaster for just about every single character. The Straw Hats, Sanji, and maybe even what's going on with Germa 66, as if there's no bride, this whole marriage thing is not going to be able to happen, and not only is that going to make Big Mom mad, but it's going to piss off Germa 66, or Germa 6, however the hell you pronounce it. I see 66 and that's what I say. So what's the rundown on this week's chapter of One Piece? What a fantastic read. Continuing to be just as amazing as the last couple of chapters of this Big Mom arc. Again, one of my favorite things about it just happens to be just everything going on in the background. There's so many ridiculous and colorful characters, like this new one they introduced in this chapter, who goes by the name of Anglice, who is this little greaser-looking kid who rides around on a caterpillar. He kind of reminds me of the Snail Rider from Neverending Story. However, being that I am something of an action junkie, I really did enjoy the scenes with Pedro and Brook just completely tearing it up. Pedro in particular, who was just absolutely ruthless in this chapter as he was just demolishing everyone in his wake. I also love the way he sort of just defies physics by running up the side of walls while dodging getting shot multiple times. There's a lot of great shots of him in this chapter that just make him seem like such a ruthless warrior and continues to make me fall in love with this character to the point where I honestly wouldn't mind seeing him being a member of the Straw Hat crew. Although, as I've said many times in the past, I still think that Carrot needs to be the next crew member. Aside from the cool action and all of the amazing backdrops from this week's chapter, I think the thing that most people are going to be talking about is what Pudding was saying at the very end of the chapter. Just trying to figure out what she is going to do. There was a small scene in this week's chapter where you got to see her hanging out with her older sister Lola, who's mentioning that she's not going to be tied down by a marriage that's been set up by her mother, and she's going to go off and find her own husband and do her own thing. This is definitely what I think has inspired Pudding to go along and do this. I just can't wait to see how she's going to execute this plan, because, like I said, it could have some pretty big repercussions in the future. What I will say is, it has to be something very shocking, as both Luffy and Nami have nothing to say when she says this at the very end of the chapter. All I know is, it's a great hook to get the reader to continue reading. And otherwise, this was just a really pleasant chapter right here. I think that Brook and Pedro were the stars, but it also had some really great intrigue at the end. And like I said, if anything, this is one of the most visually stimulating arcs of One Piece that I've ever seen. I mean, there's so many characters. Everything is alive and moving and talking, to the point that when you read these chapters and reread them, you're always going to notice something different. And I think that is one of the biggest accomplishments from this arc so far, and it's got me even more excited for when they finally get to this in the anime version. I have incredibly high hopes for this one right here. What I will say is, this one is all about Brook and Pedro, and if you like those characters, you should definitely check out this week's chapter. Getting to see them in action was great, and getting to see Brook unleash that soul technique was just metal. I loved it! He's the king of soul, and this was a great chapter of One Piece, which is why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was a thoroughly entertaining read, to the point where I read it like 3 times in a row. I just absolutely loved it. And you should definitely check it out if you're a One Piece fan. If any of you did read this week's chapter, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. What did Pudding say to Luffy and Nami? What is her plan going to be? Do you have any theories? And what do you want to see from the rest of this brand new arc of One Piece? Please tell me in the comments section. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Make sure to subscribe, leave me a comment or two, and a like. I will see you next time, and as always, stay dandy, baby.